Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and it is Sunday, so we are doing breaches of the week. And this week was crazy, just like every other week I've ever done this. So with that, I'd like to thank the following people that sent me a lot of this information. That's Jacqueline Wolf, Chris Fallon, David Walker, Jason Dance, Jason Pope, and Barrett Peterson. Thank you so very much. And if you have a tip for me, please send it my way and I'll give you a shout out as well, both here and on my radio show. And with that, let's start with a company called Securolytics. Now, this is a network security company that provides services to the healthcare industry. And this is an interesting one because their former chief operating officer, or COO, was charged with allegedly conducting a cyber attack on Georgia-based Gwinnett Medical Center. Now, 45-year-old Vikas Singhalla supposedly disrupted the health provider's ASCOM phone service and network printer service and obtained information from a Hologic R2 digitizer, which is a digitizing device, and basically he did that in September of 2018. And according to the U.S. Department of Justice's press release, Singhalla conducted the attack partially, quote, for purpose of commercial advantage and private financial gain, and that's according to the indictment. Now, Securolytics, their executive was charged with 17 counts of intentional damage to a protected computer. Each of these counts carries a maximum of 10 years in prison. He was also charged with one count of obtaining information by computer from a protected computer, which carries a maximum penalty of 5 years in prison as well. And so basically it looks like he was trying to break in, get information, and then possibly sell it to a competitor. Obviously a huge problem. And coming from a security company, that's a huge problem too, due to the morals and ethical implications for Securolytics. So hopefully they've got their reputation damage under control. Moving on, let's talk about U.S. truck and military vehicle maker Navistar, because unknown attackers stole data from their network following a cybersecurity incident discovered on May 20th of this year. Now, the company disclosed this attack to the Securities and Exchange Commission this past Monday, and Navistar says that its operations haven't been affected despite the security breach, as its IT systems are fully operational. And so here we are. Apparently, when asked if the theft claim received by Navistar contained any ransom demands, a Navistar spokesperson told Bleeping Computer that Navistar's investigation is ongoing and that they're not going to share any more details at this moment. So there you go. Heads up if you have anything to do with Navistar. Moving on, let's talk about a company called iConstituent. This is a private company that provides constituent services to congressional and state government offices. They got hit with ransomware attack, and Senator Rob Portman of Ohio, who is also the top Republican on the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, said in a hearing this past Tuesday that news of this incident demonstrates the breadth of entities vulnerable to such attacks. And I quote, "Just this morning, news broke that a constituent outreach services platform that nearly 60 offices in the United States Congress House of Representatives uses was hit with a ransomware attack. As I've said before, no one is safe from these attacks, including us." Now, iConstituent did not immediately respond basically for requests to comment. The company's website offers several tools to help federal, state, and local government officials communicate with its constituents, including a system that allows for the creation and distribution of digital newsletters and a platform for connecting with constituents and collaborating on casework. iConstituent lists among its clients the states of Hawaii, Georgia, and Illinois, as well as the cities of Los Angeles, New York, and New York State Assembly and Congress. So obviously a huge problem for state, local, and federal government here in the United States, iConstituent. Moving on, let's talk about LineStar Integrity Services. Now, this is a Houston-based company that sells auditing, compliance, maintenance, and technology services to pipeline customers. Here we go. Now, when ransomware attackers hit Colonial Pipeline last month and basically, they shut down all along the East Coast, the world woke up basically to the danger of digital disruption of the petrochemical industry. Now it appears another pipeline-focused business was also hit by a ransomware group around the same time, but they kept that breach quiet, even though they got 70 gigabytes of their data stolen and then dumped into the dark web. So it's obviously a huge problem for them. But Colonial wasn't the only pipeline or pipeline-related service hit at that time, and there we go, LineStar Integrity Services. Moving on. Let's talk about computer memory maker ADATA. They're out of Taiwan. ADATA says that a ransomware attack forces it to take its systems offline after hitting its network in late May. Now, ADATA's business operations are no longer disrupted, basically, according to them, with the affected devices being restored and services basically going back into regular performance. Ragnar Locker is the one that's claiming this attack, and they say they have allegedly stolen 1.5 terabytes of sensitive data from ADATA's network before deploying the ransomware. ADATA, for the record, was ranked as the second largest DRAM memory and solid-state drive maker in 2018. So they are a large player out of Taiwan. We're already seeing shortages, not good. So hopefully ADATA will be fully back on their feet and secure so we can keep that memory and those hard drives coming. Moving on. Let's talk about game giant EA. EA Games. Attackers have broken into the gaming giant, basically, and if you didn't know, they publish major games like Battlefield, FIFA, and The Sims, and they stole a wealth of game source code and related internal tools, and that is according to Vice by Motherboard. Now, the attackers have said they've taken the source code for FIFA 21 as well as code for its matchmaking server. The attackers also said they've obtained the source code and tools for the Frostbite engine, which powers a number of EA games, including Battlefield. Other stolen information includes proprietary EA frameworks and software development kits, bundles of code that can make game development bundles of code that can make game development more streamlined. In all, the attackers say they have about 780 gig of data and are advertising it for sale in various hacking forums in the dark web. Now, EA confirmed that it has indeed suffered a data breach and the information listed by the attackers was indeed stolen. So here we are. Heads up to you if you have anything to do with EA. We might actually be seeing fake patches come out as attackers look to basically try to sell you something or get you to update your Battlefield game or FIFA or something else. So heads up, we may see a whole bunch of stuff come out of this hitting the gaming community in the next few months or so. Moving on. Let me give you an update on JBS. This is that massive meat supplier, the largest in the world. They ended up paying $11 million in ransom and basically have most of their infrastructure back online. So that is a huge, huge thing. I'm wondering if it would have just been cheaper to secure themselves in the first place. $11 million is what they paid. Moving on, let's talk about Slilip. Now, I did not mispronounce that. That's Slilip, as far as I can tell. This is the largest online marketplace for stolen login credentials. I know I and other security researchers go there all the time to look and confirm, breaches and all of that. So the U.S. Department of Justice, or DOJ, has announced the other day that the multinational operation, took down Slilip. Now, law enforcement agencies from the United States, Germany, the Netherlands, and Romania seized servers to host that marketplace infrastructure, as well as its domain name. Now, the marketplace's websites are now replaced by a seizure banner basically on the clear web and also displaying on invalid Onion site address errors as well, meaning their Onion sites in the dark web were taken down also. Now, during an international operation, the FBI worked in coordination with prosecutors and investigators from several jurisdictions worldwide to bring them down, but that is obviously a very good thing, that Slilip has now been taken offline, so that is a win for the good guys. Moving on, let's talk about food service supplier Edward Don. They suffered a ransomware attack that has caused the company to shut down portions of their network to prevent the spread of that attack. Now, that attack disrupted the business operations, including their phone systems, network, and email. The email outage has caused employees to use things like Gmail accounts to communicate with their customers regarding urgent orders or fulfillment issues as they basically fix that up. So heads up to you if you have anything to do with Edward Don. Your business may be disrupted or worse. Moving on. Let's talk about nearly 26 million Amazon, Facebook, Apple, eBay, etc., user logins. And the reason being is that the private login information belonging to tens of millions of people was compromised after malware infiltrated over 3.2 million Windows-based computers during a 2-year span. Now, according to a report by cybersecurity provider NordLocker, a custom Trojan-type malware infiltrated computers between 2018 and 2020 and stole 1.2 terabytes of personal information. As a result, the attackers were able to get their hands on nearly 26 million login credentials, including emails, usernames, and passwords from almost a million websites. Basically, this report and research was conducted with a partnership with a third-party company that was specializing in data breach research, along with NordLocker. Now, the targeted websites include major names like Amazon, Walmart, eBay, Facebook, Twitter, Apple, Dropbox, LinkedIn, and on and on and on. So heads up to you. If your computer was infected, you may not know it. All the more reason to make sure that you've got good threat detection on those machines, and you might want to change your passwords for all of those if you are. Moving on, let's talk about the Vicksburg Warren School District in the state of Mississippi. Now, a group calling themselves Grief breached the school servers through a ransomware attack on May 28th and basically posted out there the network of Warren Vicksburg School was screwed, and now we have about 10 gigabytes of data from file servers, including internal company documents and personal information. According to our rules, we are publishing this data step by step in case if this company will keep silence. That is literally what they said. So heads up to you if you have anything to do with the Vicksburg Warren School District in the state of Mississippi. You or your child, or as if you're an employee, your information may have gotten out there. Moving on, let's talk about Audi and specifically their parent company, Volkswagen. These are the car makers, because Audi and Volkswagen have suffered a data breach affecting 3.3 million customers after a vendor exposed unsecured data on the internet. Now, Volkswagen Group of America is the North American subsidiary of the German Volkswagen Group, and it is responsible for U.S.-Canadian operations for Volkswagen, Audi, Bentley, Bugatti, Lamborghini, and VW Credit, which is the one basically here in question. Now, according to data breach notifications filed with California and Maine, basically Volkswagen of America disclosed that a vendor left an unsecured database open on the internet between August of 2019 and May of 2021. That's right, that is a long, long time. Now, on March 20th, Volkswagen of America was notified by the vendor that an unauthorized person had accessed the data and may have obtained the customer information for Audi, Volkswagen, and some authorized dealers. Volkswagen of America states that the breach involved 3.3 million customers, with over 97% of those affected relating to Audi customers and interested buyers. The data exposed basically varies per customer, but could range from contact information if you're simply interested in buying an Audi but didn't buy one, to more sensitive information such as a social security number or a loan number. So obviously if you leased or bought an Audi, they're going to have that as they ran your credit. As the Audi and Volkswagen data was unsecured for a long time, there's no telling how many people gained unauthorized access to this. Therefore, all communication claiming to be from Audi or Volkswagen should be treated suspiciously, especially email or SMS text messages. That's right. If you own an Audi or you're in the 3% that have the Volkswagen, but mostly Audi owners, if you're getting anything from Audi, do not click it, do not open it, do not do anything. Simply go to the website, for your financial portal and check there, or contact Audi directly. That is obviously a very important thing. And as always, everybody should also have their credit frozen through TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax as well. So make sure you're doing that. Heads up, Audi owners, you're in the gun sites. Might want to switch to a Mercedes. Haha. Moving on. Let's talk about Spain's Ministry of Labor and Social Economy, known as MITES, or MITES, which is what I'm about to call it. Now, they were hit by a cyber attack this past Wednesday and are working to restore the impacted services. The website of the ministry's website was still up despite the attack, but the communications office and their multimedia rooms apparently were not available, and that's all the information I have right now. But heads up, this is the second attack that the Spanish government has seen in 2021. So if you have anything to do with the Ministry of Labor and Social Economy, or MITES, in Spain, check it out. Heads up. Moving on, let's talk about the New York City Law Department. They were just the target of a cyber attack this past Monday, and employees who worked at the agency have been locked out of their accounts, according to City Hall. Now, in a statement, a City Hall spokesperson said that the attack was detected by the city's cyber command and was still being investigated as of Monday afternoon, about a week ago or so. The law department, which employs about 1,000 lawyers, provides legal representation to city agencies and employees on a range of issues and defends the city in state and federal court cases. So heads up to you if you have anything to do with the New York City Law Department. Moving on, let's talk about the Teamsters Labor Union, because apparently the Teamsters were hit by a ransomware attack over Labor Day weekend, in 2019. That's right, over 2 years ago, the attackers asked for a 7-figure payment, but the union declined to pay, despite the FBI's advice to actually do that, according to 3 sources familiar with this previously unreported attack, talking to NBC News. And I quote, "They locked down the entire system and said if we paid them, they would give us the encryption code to unlock it." Basically, everybody that talked to NBC News on the condition of they talked to NBC News on the condition of anonymity because they're not officially allowed to talk to them. They're not public spokespeople for this. Until now, the major labor union has managed to keep this attack out of the public eye for nearly 2 years. And that kind of underscores a very serious problem we have society-wide. An unknown number of companies and organizations have been extorted without ever saying a word about it publicly. And imagine if you're actually a Teamster. You're just doing your job, driving that truck, and your data was stolen, but your union didn't tell you, or even your company. You don't even have to be a Teamster. You could be anybody. You can work for Uber because Uber did the same thing. And imagine, working for them or somebody else, and they simply didn't tell you. How do you know then that you have to protect your information and your data? I'm glad the Teamsters survived this event, obviously, as I am any organization, but I really hope it's a teaching moment as well, not just for the Teamsters, but for any organization. Transparency is the key here. Bringing this up to light helps us start rebuild that trust. Now it's going to be much harder to be trusted again, so that's obviously a huge problem. Moving on. Let's talk about Puerto Rico's new electricity provider, Luma Energy. This is they're having a bad week. Let's just put it this way. The company announced that its client portal and mobile app fell victim to a cyber attack that disrupted customer access to its online services. This was a distributed denial of service attack, and it was generating 2 million visits per second to the client portal and the mobile app, and basically knocked them out. Now, the company said in a statement that it regrets that its customers experienced the inconvenience the attack may have caused and looks forward to continuing to provide them with an exceptional customer experience. Now, on the same day that this happened, they had a large fire at a substation which knocked out power to hundreds of thousands of Puerto Ricans on the island. It's unclear whether the fire and that denial of service attack are connected, but man, Luma Energy not having a good day. So heads up to you if you're on Puerto Rico and you're a Luma Energy customer. I have to imagine most of you are if they're the new game in town. Moving on, let's talk about something called RockU 2021, because it seems to be the latest version of the largest password collection of all time that was just leaked online. Now, a forum user posted a massive 100 gig text file that contained 8.4 billion entries of passwords, which were presumably combined from previous data leaks and breaches. Now, according to the post author, all passwords included in the leak are 6 to 20 characters long with non-ASCII characters and white spaces removed. The same user also claims the compilation contains 82 billion passwords. However, after running tests, researchers turned out that basically the number of that, the actual number, is 10 times lower than that at 8,459,060,239 unique entries. So another massive data breach from previous data breaches that's out there and compiled for your ease of use in finding passwords. This is why we have good password policies. This is why we enable things like adaptive multi-factor authentication. Please get on that. Both should be in your life. Moving on. I want to give you guys an update on SITA, S-I-T-A. This is that massive airline attack, and I've been talking about this one for months, as 90% of every major airline on the entire planet uses SITA to run their frequent flyer programs. But as I mentioned last week, Air India just disclosed, and that has brought some new information to light. Thank you, Air India. Now, analysts found the command and controller C2 server involved in the Air India attack first started communicating with the SITA data processing server and then began moving laterally through the network. Researchers were then able to tie Advanced Persistent Threat, or APT41, basically back to this, as the controlled IP addresses that were used in the Air India attack were those that APT41 controlled. They said the incident showed similarities with the SITA attack and others that were carried out back by APT41. Thus, analysts from Group IB who were researching this believe with moderate confidence that Column TK basically was this column, it's known as Column TK, the campaign was perpetrated by APT41. They're also known as Wicked Panda, Wicked Spider, Winty, and Barium. The group basically has been active since 2007, which is basically, they've been known to specialize in supply chain attacks, and this APT has has links and ties to China. Now, the Department of Justice, or DOJ, here in the United States in 2020 charged 5 suspected perpetrators, all of whom are residents and nationals of the People's Republic of China, with hacking more than 100 victim companies in the United States and abroad, including software development companies, computer hardware manufacturers, telecom providers, social media companies, video game companies, nonprofit organizations, universities, think tanks, foreign governments, as well as pro-democracy politicians and activists in Hong Kong. APT 41 has been very busy, so heads up to you. Moving on, once again, if we just got past tax season here in the United States, but if you use TurboTax by Intuit, here we go. Now, Intuit has notified TurboTax customers that some of their personal and financial information was accessed by attackers following what looks like a series of account takeover attacks. In a breach notification letter sent to affected customers earlier this month, the company said that this was not a, quote, systemic data breach of Intuit. In account takeover attacks, if you didn't know, basically the criminal gains access to your account by using credentials that they've stolen from you from either online services, from past data breaches, meaning you didn't realize your data was breached, you have a username and password on the dark web, they grab it, they try to log into TurboTax, and voila, they're able to. That is essentially an account takeover attack. That does not mean Intuit's infrastructure was hit. Now, this type of attack works incredibly well against targets who basically uses the same login credentials for multiple sites or services. Another thing I continuously underscore, outside of multi-factor authentication, which I literally just mentioned, adaptive multi-factor authentication, is that if you're reusing passwords, it's a huge problem. Make sure that if you're using TurboTax, you have a different password than Facebook, and Facebook should have a different password than everything, and the bank for everything, and on and on and on. Don't reuse passwords. And if you figure out that one of these is hit, make sure you're changing that password. And now you don't have to change it in 20 sites or 50 sites. You just have to change it one place. Make sure you're doing that. Please, please, please. I can't recommend that enough. Moving on. Let's talk about the baby clothes giant Carter's. Carter's is a huge clothing giant for children and babies. They inadvertently exposed the personal data of hundreds of thousands of their customers going back years, according to a new disclosure. Now, this issue started with Link, L-I-N-C, which is a vendor the company used to automate purchases online, and this is according to analysts with VPN Mentor who discovered this issue. Now, the Link system was delivering customers shortened URLs with Carter purchase and shipping details, but didn't have basic security protections on it. These links contained everything from personal details to tracking information and more. The analysts calculated more than 410,000 records and hundreds of thousands of customer records were exposed in the leak, which they estimate goes as far back as 2015. So, if you're using Carter's and you have babies or small children since 2015 and on, you might want to check in because your information may have been exposed. Obviously, that's a huge thing, and they are a rather large chain for kids here in the United States. Moving on, let's talk about Cyberpunk 2077 publisher CD Projekt. This is actually an update from a previous data breach because they announced this past Thursday that the data breach it suffered earlier this year was potentially more damaging than they really thought. Now, part of the statement that they have on Twitter, and I quote, "Today we have learned new information regarding the breach and now have reason to believe that internal data illegally obtained during the attack is currently being circulated on the internet. We are not able to confirm the exact contents of the data in question, though we believe it may include current/former employee and contractor details in addition to data related to our games. Furthermore, we cannot confirm whether or not the data involved may have been manipulated or tampered with following the breach." Obviously, when you're getting software source code, here come the fake patches that will infect you and start stealing your gamer information or worse. But basically what they're saying here is, and we now see this on the dark web, the data is more than we thought it was. Oh my God. So if you're a current or former employee of CD Projekt, I believe they're out of Poland, or a contractor, heads up to you. Obviously, you're not having a good week. Moving on. Let's talk about CaptureRx, another update. Week after week, more medical practices are disclosing that they were using CaptureRx and getting their patients essentially hit. This week, it was Metro Health Systems in Cleveland, Ohio, and also Neighborhood Family Practice, also out of Cleveland, Ohio as well. And obviously, as more come up, you know I will tell you about them here. Moving on, let's talk about Arnoff Moving and Storage. They're out of Poughkeepsie. Customers may have had their data stolen by attackers as part of a breach, according to the company. They couldn't say how many customers may have been impacted, how long ago the data may have been from, or if the breach was limited to its regional mid-Hudson Valley branches. While the Poughkeepsie-based company serves Dutchess, Orange, Ulster, and Putnam counties, it also has offices in the Capital Region, Western Connecticut, and Massachusetts, as well as Florida, according to its website. Now, the alleged attackers posted to a website that they claim are examples of private information, including forms that have names, contact information, and credit card numbers. So obviously, it looks like they got hit, ransomed, and now they're on a leak site. So if you have anything to do with Arnoff Moving and Storage in out of Poughkeepsie or any one of those states, heads up to you. And finally, and we've got a few different finalies here. This has been a really interesting week for ransomware evolution. But before we do that, we are going to be talking about McDonald's, and there are multiple reports on McDonald's. So McDonald's Corp, which is the world's largest restaurant or burger chain, said basically this past Friday that a data breach in South Korea and Taiwan has exposed some customer and employee information, making it the largest global company to be targeted by cyber criminals. Now, the attackers apparently accessed emails, phone numbers, and delivery addresses, but did not breach the breach did not include customer payment information, according to McDonald's. Now, no U.S. customer data was breached, according to McDonald's, talking to the Wall Street Journal, and the data of employees that was exposed was not sensitive or personal. U.S. employees were told in an email that the breach exposed some U.S. business contact information and franchise data. Now, McDonald's serves almost basically, there are hundreds of millions of customers every day in 39,000 locations in 100 countries, including roughly 14,000 here in the United States alone. So this is going to be one of the largest in scope data breaches, but it seems like it's basically narrowed in scope to South Korea and Taiwan, with a little bit here in the United States, and we'll see what happens if this grows. But I think Ronald McDonald, honestly, is about to get sued. I am not loving this. Moving on, let's talk about a new ransomware tactic that obviously I think is a huge problem here. Now, basically the criminal gangs that carried out the ransomware attacks on JBS, Colonial Pipeline, and others are basically spinning up a new tactic. In April, REvil demonstrated this new tactic called triple extortion, according to researchers from Check Point Security. Now, at that time, the gang launched an attack on Quanta Computer, a Taiwan-based laptop manufacturer which builds systems for U.S. companies like Apple, Dell, and HP. I actually remember doing them, talking about them in Breaches of the Week. The group went on to attempt to extort Apple directly, claiming to have confidential blueprints of future Apple products, adding yet another layer of ransom demand. The DarkSide gang behind Colonial Pipeline has also adopted this ransomware tactic. And so here's how triple extortion essentially works. Conventional ransomware involves breaching a computer network and then encrypting all of the valuable data so that's no longer accessible by a victim. The attackers then demand a ransom in return for the decryption key. Double extortion goes further by then tacking on threats to leak the data, meaning they've now exfiltrated the data and saying even if you don't pay for the key, you're going to pay to make sure this data is not doesn't get out there into the dark web or possibly harm, let's say, your customers or damage your reputation. Triple extortion then, on top of that, expands the reach to the customers, meaning, oh, I see that this other massive corporation is tied to the corporation I just hit. We have their sensitive data sitting over here, so now we're going to ransom this corporation as well. So when Quanta, that is making basically those laptops or iPhones or whatever they're making, for Apple, now they've got the specification. So REvil's going to turn around and say, well, we're going to ransom Quanta for the actual locking out. We're going to ransom Quanta for the data, but we're going to turn around and say, hey, we also have Apple data, very public. Apple, you're going to pay us too. That's obviously a huge problem. Now, the addition to this, with a distributed denial of attack throwing that into the mix, which basically overwhelms the victim organization with a flood of internet traffic, can also be another form of triple extortion as well, meaning we'll stop the attacks. And so that's obviously a huge problem. Quadruple extortion would be all four. But we are seeing that evolve. The attackers are not just stealing the data and holding it for ransom to leak it so they can get you 2 times. They're now looking through that data and saying, oh my God, there's some massive corporations here like Apple. Obviously, Apple's got cash. We're going to hit them too. This is how this is working, and this is starting to evolve. And that's a very interesting tactic, because last week we also saw the Babak ransomware gang say they're no longer going to focus on delivering ransomware, meaning disrupting networks, locking out the files. They're going to focus on just stealing the data and then ransoming that for reputation damage, meaning we're going to leak it on the dark web if you don't pay, but we didn't disrupt your system. See, we're nice people. That's obviously a huge problem. Now, with that, this dovetails in with the next finally, and this is the finally that we have, and that's a new type of ransomware that could be 10 times more dangerous than the regular ransomware we already know and hate. Now, what we're talking about here is something that we're calling jackware. Now, what makes this more dangerous is because instead of encrypting like the Windows computers and servers and locking up your Word files and Excel files, jackware actually hijacks actual physical devices and machines that essentially run our day-to-day life. Now, malware is generally something that only has affected computers, but over the last 20 years, there has been a boom in development of basically very tiny computers, if you will, that add connectivity and smart features to every type of machine and device that is pretty much in your life. These tiny computers are known as embedded devices, and they now play a key role in critical infrastructure, in your car, in mass transit, healthcare, office buildings, and even your house. Just like a desktop computer, embedded devices are also vulnerable to malware. Now, however, the difference between hacking a computer and hacking an embedded device is that basically hacking an embedded device has a direct physical consequence to the user. It's the reason why jackware is so dangerous. It basically is because it can shut down an embedded device, crippling a larger physical machine. That means cyber attacks would lead to even worse disruptions in critical services and supplies than what we've seen with typical ransomware, while also potentially causing permanent physical damage and even putting people's lives in danger. So for example, if let's say malware disrupts the ECU or electronic control unit in your car, it could cause your brakes to malfunction or prevent your engine from starting, essentially bricking the car. It could also break a $1 million MRI machine. It could cause a pipeline to shut down for months or trigger a fire or an explosion in an electronic substation. Subways may not run. Airplanes may not be able to take off or land if activated while in the air. Even buildings can be sabotaged because they rely on these automated systems to operate. HVAC controls, that mechanical contractors use are very ripe for this kind of attack. Imagine being able to shut down the entire ventilation system in a building, or essentially hijack an HVAC furnace to turn it up to 120 degrees, and you can't stop the heat from coming out without just physically killing the building, which actually would have to just evacuate it, killing the system in the building. Add to that the fact that we basically never patch or update much of these systems once they're in place, and that's a very serious issue. An example I have used both on the radio and on this podcast/video series is that I used to drive, a really nice car. It was a luxury car about a decade ago, and I owned it for 5 years. And every time I'd go into the dealer for service, I'd say, hey, is there an update to my Bluetooth head unit? Because my Bluetooth head unit that basically I could link my phone to, the car's navigation system, and a lot of the electronics were linked all through its head unit. Is there an update for this, for the Bluetooth and everything else? And the answer for 5 straight years from a German luxury maker was no, we don't have an update for this thing. How many patches, how many vulnerabilities have cropped up in Bluetooth and everything else? At one point, I did the math, and it was around 160 or so different vulnerabilities, and that's what we're talking about. Imagine being able to hijack that and slam on the brakes when I'm just flying down the highway, or hit the accelerator and I run into a tree, or God forbid somebody else with this. This is what we're talking about here. This is becoming more prevalent, and as we are living in a state of constant cyber attack with the Colonial Pipelines of the world, and yes, the pipeline itself, the industrial control systems that run that pipe were not hit, but we are talking about basically malware that is being developed, exploding, and targeting those industrial control systems, those operational technology networks. This is a huge, huge problem that we society-wide have to address, because it's only going to get out. It's not something that it's well, it's Breaches of the Week, so I'm always going to be a Debbie Downer every Sunday. But I hope nobody was affected this week, and if you were, let me know. I'd love to hear your story, and we can discuss. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe and stay online. Thanks, everyone.